Welcome to Ethics Shorts. Whether you're a seasoned professional, a student embarking on your counseling journey, or simply curious about the ethical dimensions of mental health, this podcast is for you. Our hosts will unravel ethical quandaries, explore real-life scenarios, and discover the gray areas that shape our profession. This podcast is sponsored by the Arkansas Counseling Association. The views expressed in the content belong to the content creators and not the organization, its affiliates, or employees. Let's talk about ethics.
Hello, everybody. I want to welcome you back to another episode of the Ethics Shorts. I'm Dr. Jones. I am one of the co-chairs of the Ethics Committee for the Arkansas Counseling Association.
I'm Helen Jennings-Hood. I'm also a co-chair for the Arkansas Counseling Association's Ethics Committee.
All right. And so today we have an interesting topic we're going to be looking at. We'll be talking about the ethical professionalism as a counselor in training. And so we're going to spend a little bit more time today looking at people who are currently in master's programs in counseling and looking to see what does it mean for them to develop that piece of them where they become the individuals who know how to practice ethically, and what does that look like from the beginning of a counseling program through the end of the counseling program. So we want to spend some time there. Helen and I we're just talking about this a few minutes ago about how as we look at many counseling programs, ethics is like one of the first things that is being taught in the in most counseling programs. And I'm kind of curious, Helen, kind of your viewpoint. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that's one of the first things we want our students to understand is about ethics?
Because I think that ethics are our map, our guidelines, our guide rails to ethical practice, to that professional identity piece that's so important. And I think, getting introduced to that really early, we learned kind of the basics. We learned the structure of the code of ethics. And then we get to see how those are applied in our other classes as different situations come up, as we learn different topics, about the little pieces about learning to be a counselor and how to ethically practice with clients. It's really important to get that really early and to start that process of building that in for yourself.
And I think for me, I think it helps from the beginning for them to have a good understanding of this is the expectation that we're going to have for you once you get out into the field. But it's I don't think it's really a fair process to say, okay, let's wait to the end and figure out what you need to do. We want to start that right at the beginning of the master's program, help them see here's the expectations. These are all the ideals that hold our profession together. And then also try to figure out how do we maneuver through this, and especially since you do get ethics in more than just an ethics class, knowing how we go about and maneuvering it makes it really, really helpful for not only the students, but for the people that will end up serving in the long run.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
No, I was agreeing, thinking about if we didn't have that ethical education first thing, if we did just kind of build it in there at the end and say, okay, now you're a professional, all these things, and here's your code of ethics, you should adhere to this. It doesn't really give us a whole lot of time to practice that in, as developing our professional identity and that kind of professionalism that comes from being in the field as a counselor. You have to uphold certain standards, and that's what our ethics teach us to do.
And especially if we look at ethics as being a developmental process, that term comes up a lot in counseling, but it definitely is a developmental process because they may take the class at the beginning, but then when they're multicultural, ethics is going to come up again. When they're taking research, ethics is going to come up again. So it's that beginning point where we're helping them to start to see this is really important, but there's much more to it than this one ethics class you have. It's going to continue to spread from here, and you're going to see it over and over again. One of the interesting things, if we look at F5A from the ACA Code of Ethics, it reads this way. It says ethical responsibility of students and supervisees. And it says that they have a responsibility to understand and follow the ACA Code of Ethics. And students and supervisees have the same obligation to clients as those required of professional counselors. And I like that ACA begins it that way. So it's helping to remind the students that this once again, this is not a process that starts at the end, when you're starting to see clients, that this is a process that starts at the beginning, that they're held to the same standard as someone who's already licensed and already that's been in the field for a while.
Yeah, you can think of that introduction to ethics right there at the beginning with your ethics class as like your ethical training wheels, for how you're supposed to interact with others in the field, interact with your clients, other professionals. And, it kind of gives you that direction to keep you in line in a certain way with that professionalism in mind as you're developing within your master's program.
And I think for me, I think that's a good, I guess, model for students, and also from, I think, as professors as well. That's a good model for me to be able to recognize, hey, I'm helping them to understand, like, this is a very serious thing, and this is something we're starting now. So this becomes natural because, just in conversation we've had before about, with people with ethics violations, it's not necessarily something that is unknown or some like hidden code somewhere that you didn't know about. It was something that was pretty much well known, that's been talked about in the ethics class or talked about in the program. But because someone did not practice those principles and did not adhere to those, it became those bad choices became a part of who they were. And so hopefully we're beginning those good choices at the beginning and help them to see, okay, this is what it means, and this is why we do it, so we don't find ourselves in these situations and what we don't know how to get out of. So that, to me, I think is a good thing that we will, that constant reminder for the students there.
Yeah, and I think that we think about it just as counselors with license who are practicing with clients and other professionals, like we think about it as just being about our practice, but it's really about the way that we show up, as we present ourselves and the way we handle ourselves. We were talking earlier about the NBCC code, the new updated version, code 88, and it talks about how counselor educators shall establish clear written behavioral and dispositional expectations for students, as well as policies regarding student remediation. So we're called upon by our NBCC ethics to watch out for client disposition, to give them these guidelines, how to show up in their master's programs, how to develop that professionalism.
And when we use that word, dispositions, it's definitely, from at least from my perspective, a hot button type of topic, because there's some things are very easy to be able to pull out and look at when we're talking about with students. So if it's just as a pure academic issue, those are pretty straightforward for remediation. Because like, maybe you're not doing well in a class. Maybe I can help you to learn how to study better, whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. That's pretty straightforward. Or there's a health issue or something like that. Those things are pretty easy to like kind of work through a lot of times. But when we start talking about dispositions, we're really looking at, like you said earlier, how does this person present themselves to other classmates, present themselves to their coworkers, present themselves to their professors as well, and knowing that's going to be reflective of how they're going to end up presenting to their clients at some point as well. And for me, the dispositions are a little bit more difficult sometimes to deal with, because sometimes it could be a part of a person's personality. And like, how do you say to someone, hey, we need to work on your personality, or it just may be some things that they're doing unknowingly that we can work through. But those dispositions really are an important part of trying to help our students to develop those as quick as they possibly can, so those won't end up becoming barriers for them as they're trying to progress and learn as a counselor in training.
Yeah, and I think it's important to think about disposition in relation to professionalism, because I know you and I have had conversations about professionalism as far as dress codes and things like that, and how those things can be a little bit subjective. But in this situation, we're talking about that professionalism piece of showing up ethically in all spaces that you're showing up as your professional self. And so I think while disposition is harder to deal with as far as like remediation, or even, finding the thing that is going, wrong or rubbing people the wrong way, but I think it's just as important.
And I think to me, I think there's a boldness you have to be able to take to be able to deal with those dispositions in the right way, because I will also make sure that I'm coming off in the right way as a counselor educator, to make sure that things I'm saying and the things I'm doing are good dispositions as well, because once again, so it goes back to that modeling piece where I have to model good dispositions, even if the student is not modeling a disposition, because then if we're both not, then chaos can kind of can happen at that point.
Absolutely. But I think if we kind of go back to the very beginning, kind of the preamble of the ACA Code of Ethics, we're also, thinking about those values. Fidelity is one that talks about, honoring commitments, keeping promises, showing up as a person of your word, fulfilling your responsibilities and obligations, which are really important in your master's program.
And when you think about fidelity, it's about honoring commitments. To me, that is a big thing too, as a student. I think sometimes that they will struggle with that somewhat, because from their perspective, sometimes, not all students, with some students, they will, from their perspective, some of the things that we may call out being things that are go against fidelity, they may think, well, that's not that big of a deal. But it can be a big deal, So, for example, if I'm not turning my assignments in on time, or things of that nature, that can be very reflective of, okay, I have notes as a counselor that I have to turn those things in on time, because that's important to the client's well-being, and it's important to their care plan and things of that nature. And so, I think always going back and drawing those parallels between, okay, if these things are happening in a classroom, what's that going to look like when you're sitting in front of a client? And if you are having trouble honoring your commitments in the classroom, how do you go about honoring your commitment to your client that you will be seeing sometime down the road? And so just that, to me, a constant, that a reminder of, hey, there's definitely a parallel between what we do here in the classroom and how you're going to end up dealing with your client, your future clients that you're going to have.
Absolutely. Because, I think that a lot of times, kind of coming into a counseling master's program, there's a lot of focus on doing counseling and learning to do counseling. But there's all these good faith things that counselors end up having to do, and they are responsible for that. We're just taking at our word. And so developing that portion of our professional identity through being ethical in our professionalism is really important.
So right now, I feel like we have a really unique challenge. Now, I don't think, and I call it a challenge, but I don't think it's impossible to overcome. But one of the things we're now starting to see is a lot of artificial intelligence finding itself into the classroom. And so, me, I'm big into technology. I love technology. I love talking about those type of things. But what I'm starting to see, and I think a lot of professors are seeing that too, is that when we talk about veracity, dealing truthfully with individuals with who counselors come into professional contact, that the use of some of this technology and use of AI, things like ChatGPT and things of that nature, really goes against veracity. Because part of the problem is, if I'm willing to take a shortcut, when it comes to writing a paper as a counseling student, as a professor, my mind is automatically going, okay, if you're willing to take this shortcut with me, what kind of shortcuts are you willing to take down the road when it comes to whether it's with an insurance company? Would you take a shortcut with them on your billing and billing correctly? And so, to me, those are things I just try to help students to be reminded of. Yeah, this is an easier route if you want to do things that way. Yes, it's easy. But are you learning the things that you need to learn so you'll actually be prepared to work with the clients you have in the future? So regardless of what class it is, I'm doing my own stuff. I'm doing my own work because I know it's reflective of who I am, and it's going to help me to be prepared. But if I'm not really preparing, I've just gone through a bunch of classes for no reason, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's a certain level of investment that counselors have to have in their profession. To be a good counselor, to be an ethical counselor, you have to be invested in your profession. And the way that you show that in the beginning when you're a counselor in training is through investment in yourself and your education within your program. So you're showing up authentically, working hard, doing your best. And I think too, on the other side of that, like counselor educators are giving you, they're giving you the best information that they have and that they can. And so taking any kind of shortcut or taking any kind of easy way around assignments or things like that, like you're just cheating yourself. And then later on down the road, what if you needed the information you were supposed to have learned? And then you're sitting in front of a client. So I think the best way to be an ethical counselor is to show investment in yourself. And that begins with your education as a counselor.
And to me, it's those small things that we do now, which can grow to big things, either in a positive or negative way down the road. Just for example, if I'm doing a discussion board, for example, the easy way is for me to do the most minimal I possibly can because I just want to get through because I don't want to do it. Or I can take the harder route and say, you know what, I need to know more about this topic. It's been brought up for some reason. I may not like the modality of the discussion board. I'm sure everybody had different discussion boards. I'm not the biggest fan, but there's a purpose behind them. And so it's like to help to think through things. But if my ideology behind this, let me just get this as quick as I possibly can. Once again, I ask myself the question, okay, is that professionally, is that how you want to come across? Is that I got through this as quickly as I possibly could to be able to do that, whether it's an assignment or even getting through a counseling program. I think I hear that a lot. Well, I'm on this timetable. I have to get through. I have to get quick. And I'm like, what is a rush? It's like, I want to make sure I'm taking the time to learn this skill and to learn this craft, because to me, counseling is an art and a science that you both learn. But you really can't learn that if my mindset is, let me get through it as quickly as I possibly can, and which can definitely affect me and my competence and my knowledge, which is going to affect how I end up working with clients down the road.
Agreed.
So just as kind of wrapping this up, what will you? I guess we both can do a couple of these. What would be some things that if you're speaking directly to counselors in training, what are some of your go-tos when it comes to professionalism? You say, okay, these are things that to be mindful of as you're in the classroom. What would it look like for on your end? I'll share a couple of mine as well.
One of the biggest things I have heard in my programs and that I also talk to my students about is making sure that you understand what is expected of you. And so that means, asking questions, reading your student handbook, anything that gives you information about what professionalism looks like in the field and how you can show up in that professionalism. Another thing is that encouragement of investment. You're here. The time is ahead of you. It's going to pass regardless. Get what you can out of the program. And that means engaging. So invest in yourself and your own education and your future by engaging. Ask questions. If you don't understand something, that's normal in the beginning of your graduate program or any part of your graduate program. And this is a place where you can learn and you have access to people. So, taking advantage of opportunities to learn things too, outside of just your classwork, but, definitely reading your chapters, definitely, if you get a chance to email ahead of time for feedback, take that chance, take that opportunity, talk to your professors, accept their office hours, things like that, like really, really invest yourself in it.
And I like that list. I think one thing I would add to that is coming to the whole counseling program process as a learner. I think whenever we have people, especially in counseling programs, sometimes it may be a second career for some people, which is great, and that's perfectly fine. And sometimes you have people coming straight from undergrad straight into the program, which is fine as well. Or they may even have some experience in these mental health spaces. And I think all those things are great and good. I think part of it, is being able to still come to those programs open to learning and to new experiences. Because if I come into it kind of with a lot of tunnel vision, well, I've got this down, or I had this class before, or something like that, it can really keep you from learning more about yourself, because I think that's a big part of the counseling process, and also learning about the people you're going to be working with in the future. And so I think professionalism is really being able to say, what, although I may have some knowledge in a certain area, I'm going to be open to hear and be open to learning other things. And even when the stuff I'm hearing doesn't necessarily sit or fit with what my viewpoints are, I can hear those things And maybe that gives me an opportunity to be able to ask those questions to see why there's a difference, because I know as professors, there are times where the students may not necessarily agree with some of the things that are being taught. And I encourage those times to say, okay, what about that's not fitting for you? What about that's not feeling good for you? And so I feel like students have two choices at that point. They can get upset about it and not say anything, which well, for me, now they've lost an opportunity to learn, or they can appropriately challenge and say, hey, I've got some questions about this. I want to learn more. And to me, I think that's a good part of what professionalism looks like, is that I ask the questions I need to ask, even when I don't understand things, or when the stuff I'm hearing coming out doesn't really fit or match with the perspective I'm coming from. Because that's how, like, to me, I think that's how we learn about different people, and we learn new knowledge that way.
Yeah. Being humble, but also having a healthy dose of curiosity.
I like that word, healthy dose of curiosity, because when we're curious, I'm open to new things, and it doesn't mean, okay, I'm gung ho 100%. That's the thing I'm doing, but I stay curious, and I think that does become helpful, and that's something that hopefully doesn't stop at graduation. That we hopefully continue to stay curious throughout our career, and that means I may switch and do some things differently. But that, to me, I get it. That's how I grow as a professional. Is like staying, like you said, staying curious in that way. So hopefully this has kind of been helpful for y'all today, as we begin just kind of talking just a little tiny bit about what does it look like to grow, or what professionalism as a counselor in training, and how does the code of ethics kind of come into contact with that. And so hopefully that some of the things we talked about today will be good things for you to kind of be pondering about, to be thinking about, but just thankful for this opportunity for us to be able to kind of come and join with you today, and looking forward to another episode of Ethics Shorts with y'all. So I hope you all have a great day.